How television's portrayal of dogs leaves everyone in the doghouse. A content analysis of the unrealistic messages about dog behavior across genres and time. Presented by Patricia Ryan for my Sociology 496 Capstone project. Framed by the cultivation theory, my research asks what recurring themes and messages are television viewers frequently exposed to regarding dogs and dog ownership. As dog ownership steadily increases in America, especially in more populated and urban areas, social scientists realize there is a considerable need to understand the motivation behind acquiring a dog. Early on in my literature review, I noticed contradictions regarding dog ownership. To create a holistic understanding of available literature, I grouped my research into 4 themes. I will begin with the history of dog ownership. Dogs have been owned by humans and been part of our society for thousands of years. Between 1970 and 2010, policy changes, as well as dog welfare awareness campaigns, profoundly changed the dog owner experience and shelter practices. This led to more intentional dog ownership. The American Pet Product Association estimates that approximately 53% of Americans own dogs. While the literature disagrees on the reasons for the increase, it does agree that dog ownership is changing. Many dog owners consider dogs family members rather than pets. Literature is addressing how the increased valuation of dogs is impacting owners and the general population. The role of dogs in society. Literature finds dogs exist in a liminal space somewhere between property and family member. The bulk of the literature on human-dog interaction focuses on subpopulations that rely on service dogs. Literature differs on the causes of the benefits and the strengths of the findings. However, it agrees that the benefits found evident for subpopulations are not generalizable. Across demographics, however, dog owners self-report positive benefits, and the literature frequently points out that these benefits have not been proven. The complicated reality of dog ownership. Prior research findings that explored shelter relinquishment have been impacted by studies focusing on recent natural disasters, focusing on populations that refuse to relinquish dogs in dire circumstances for evacuation. These findings have impacted FEMA policies regarding domestic pet owners during emergency situations. It has also impacted prior understandings of the literature that investigates voluntary relinquishment by challenging it. Fairly new and limited literature addresses the dog owner dynamic specifically. The dog owner dynamic. Findings show that voluntary relinquishment is actually related to unmet expectations of the dog owner about the dog owner experience, rather than any sort of reality that they are experiencing. The expectations versus reality of owning a dog. Across demographics, literature finds an existence of a commonly held ideal about dogs. Studies emphasize the concept of a dog as a companion is deeply ingrained, as well as a common societal belief that dogs are essentially morally good. Studies recognize that breed-specific laws as being directly influenced by this phenomenon. Other findings show that first-time dog owners often overestimate their own knowledge and ability regarding dogs, care, and dog training. Significant studies such as Kwan et al., Irvine et al., and Vink et al. Find that dog owners frequently accept their own knowledge of dogs as sufficient, even when they have no first-hand experience with dogs, and that they blame dog problems on the dogs themselves. The findings also show that dog owners consistently overestimate benefits and underestimate costs of dog ownership. Bauma, Vink, and Dijkstra suggest that this underestimation of costs may actually be a source for behavior problems and dissatisfaction with the dog owner experience. The underestimation of costs could result in not exercising a dog enough, which would lead to bad behavior. First framed by Judge Gerbner in 1969, cultivation theory postulates that themes and messages, which make up television's reality, can shape social norms and beliefs about our real world. Gerbner and subsequent researchers find that the messages that permeate many types of programs and occur with frequency lead to the most robust effect in influence. Studies show that viewing television is a form of unconscious learning, and when the television reality is plausible, this learning is greatly influenced. Even when subjects are made aware of and can identify non-reality elements, their perceptions are still directly influenced. Messages that carry a type of moral message are especially salient. Research also shows that television viewed during childhood continues to influence social beliefs well into adulthood. Cultivation theory guides my research question, which investigates the recurring themes and messages regarding dogs and dog ownership. Cultivation theory has repeatedly shown that public perceptions of social realities that they have no direct personal experience with are largely informed by the messages unconsciously learned through the media and in television. Individuals rarely examine their own stock knowledge source. I use the method of content analysis for my research. Content analysis, as defined by Shute in Understanding the Social World, is systematically analyzing and inferring from human communication sources. My methodology for this research grew out of literature that found first-time dog owners without first-hand experience consistently overestimating their knowledge of dog behavior and had expectations of a dog owner relationship. This question led me to the cultivation theory. My method was also informed by a study from Rajiki, Rasmussen, and Connors, which addressed the impact of movie messages about dog behavior. I began my research by watching 2 random episodes of a sitcom I knew had dogs. From there, I began to create my sample. I knew that I wanted my sample of shows to target different age groups, and I also wanted to investigate if messages changed over time. Dogs that are on television are exceptionally well trained, yet they portray typical dogs. I wanted my sample to be purposive in this regard, and I also wanted to choose shows that had high viewership. I did this by using the incognito window setting to eliminate personal algorithm biases and searched for popular television dogs and favorite television dogs. Excluding movie dogs, animated dogs, dogs with special powers, and dogs that were the star of their show, such as Lassie, I came up with my sample of 4 shows. Comet from Full House, Eddie from Frasier, Stella from Modern Family, and Cheddar from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Each of these series met my criteria for viewership as all 4 shows were critically acclaimed and are viewed in syndication. This is important as it will stretch to many viewers. An additional benefit of these 4 shows is that the layout of years allows my content analysis to span a time frame from 1989 through 2020. Each episode is 22 minutes in length. The shows also serve the purpose of reaching different targeted age groups. Full House is rated for general audiences. Frasier and Modern Family are rated for parental guidance, and Brooklyn Nine-Nine is rated for TV 14. Each family featured is a distinctly different type of family as well. Using IMDb.com, and searching episode credits, I gathered my sample size of 3 episodes per show. I then operationalized themes and behaviors by defining the indicators that would allow me to note these behaviors. The characteristics noted in the literature as being commonly assumed to be ascribed to dogs were defined by behaviors that could be noted, such as the characteristic of attentive, ears perking, looking at the speaker, or responding with an action that denoted understanding of the situation would indicate that the characteristic of attentive should be noted. A tracking sheet was created by hand for tally marks to record frequency of behaviors and a blank space for observational notes. I initially anticipated viewing each episode 2 times. However, this increased over my method follow-through. Each episode was viewed from a subscription-based streaming service called Hulu. On the first viewing, I took observation notes. I marked the timestamps of each scene with dogs and tallied behaviors. In the second viewing, I used a different colored pen and the same sheet of paper. The observations did vary sometimes between the first and second viewing, and so a third viewing was used using the timestamps to watch dog scenes. This self-check system of ink color changes helped to decrease subjectivity. I had planned to record scenes that the dog is expected in but is not present. For example, in Frasier, one would expect the dogs to be present in all apartment scenes, but not in office scenes. However, this became too nuanced to confidently record. My analytic technique. I inputted my findings into Excel. This layout revealed new discrepancies in the data. I then rewatched each episode by timestamps one final time. I noted commonalities in data and regrouped coded behaviors by condensing them into positive and negative categories. By comparing the data and grouping themes and behaviors, I discovered patterns and conclusions. And I found that my qualitative observation notes were especially useful in understanding my data. 2 challenges emerged in my analysis. One was that highly trained and cued behaviors are challenging to record. Much of dog behavior, good dog behavior, and extraordinary dog training actually exists in the negative, such as not barking at the door, bell ringing, or not jumping on guests. The second challenge was Stella from Modern Family. Stella is frequently carried and she is very cooperative. However, this behavior proved difficult to define without prior knowledge of what French bulldogs would actually act like. Graphs and charts were created in Excel to help clarify the findings. Three themes existed in all 4 shows. Dog as a problem solver. The theme that love for the dog solves all of the dog problems. And the theme that anti-dog statements are villainized occurred in all 3 shows. 90 total themed observations were tallied. It should be noted that Cheddar from Brooklyn Nine-Nine is on screen considerably less frequently than the other 3 dogs. However, the human characters verbally attribute themes of dog as a comfort and dog as family glue to Cheddar. The theme results may be influenced if the coding criteria was to include human comments when the dog is not present. It also should be noted that at the onset of my research, dog barking was coded as a negative dog behavior. However, my observation notes helped inform the data and showed that each time the dogs barked in the series observed, they were using a hero or problem-solving technique, and the barks were to alert their owners. Therefore, dog barking was recoded to fit into dog as a problem solver and a hero. It also is worth noting that All of the anti-dog statements that were villainized were said by characters that were not the primary dog owners within the reality of the TV show. In these scenes, the character making the statements against the dog were behaving the least favorably, and therefore these statements were villainized. "160 dog behaviors were tallied, and 82 human behaviors. The pie charts reflect that viewers were exposed to different dog behaviors, and 83% of those were positive incidents, and only 17% projected negative dog incidents. This is related to the theory, the cultivation theory, and the research from my literature review, in that dog owners underestimate the costs of dogs ownership and overestimate the benefits. This pie chart corresponds with that information. Most often, dogs are acting in a highly trained manner. None of the dogs display the behaviors most cited in research as reasons for surrender or dog owner dissatisfaction. Behaviors such as aggression, barking, or puppy-like mischief were absent from most of the shows. As noted, barking in the TV was always in a hero-type manner. Aggression was not noted in any of the shows. Expressions of annoyance for the dog were always done by the non-primary dog owner within the reality of the show. And when these annoyances happened in the scene, it is a character acting the least desirable who were making these statements. The expressions of love for the dog are equal in percentage to the expressions of annoyance for dog. However, this is just a coincidence. They did not directly correlate within the episodes. The expressions of love for the dog always came from the primary dog owner. It was rare to observe dog owners within the shows doing chores or speaking about chores. And when they did participate in dog ownership chores, they were minor and inconsequential, such as fetching the dog water or taking the dog for a walk. Connections to the theory and additional notes. It's important to realize that the average amount of time the dogs were on screen was 304.5 seconds, and the variation was pretty significant, with a range of 649 seconds between the minimum and the maximum. During the time on screen, viewers were exposed to highly trained and cued behaviors. What's important to note about highly trained dog behaviors is that most of that is in the absence of behaviors rather than the presence of behaviors. So television viewers were exposed to dogs that were unobtrusive, and this was seen across all 4 episodes, and also viewers would be exposed to these across the 3 different ratings. There are limitations to the study. The length of the college semester was a time limit, and the time limit also influenced my sample size. There were only 12 episodes were able to be included in this study. However, a larger sample size would yield better results. There are inherent limits to content analysis, as content is fixed and subject to interpretation. Interviews or surveys to assess dog owners' viewing experiences would have added to the research. However, this option was not possible due to pandemic limits. The interpretation of dog behavior was limited by my own knowledge or lack of knowledge of canine behavior. I limited this problem by consulting several canine science articles to guide my research guidelines. Scholarship on human-dog interaction studies have only recently begun in earnest in the United States. Therefore, my literature often was from sources outside of the United States. And finally, my personal bias. I am a known dog lover. However, I do not believe that this will interfere with my ability to remain objective as a researcher. In conclusion, the content analysis showed evidence that unrealistic ideals of dogs and dog ownership are prevalent in all 4 series, namely, that none of the dogs featured were disruptive. The benefits of dog ownership are significantly more frequently portrayed than dog ownership costs. The cost of dog ownership is never portrayed by the primary character who owns the dog within the show. And the theme that the love for the dog solves all of the dog problems was prevalent across all 4 series. This relates to the content, to the cultivation theory in regards to the literature that finds that many dog owners, despite the means and education, when confronted with a dog behavior problem, do not seek to fix the problem, but believe that if they just love the dog enough or are understanding enough, or that the problem will resolve. And the findings also suggest that within the framework of the cultivation theory, television may be a source for dog owners' unrealistic expectations. The most frequent message across all of the episodes was that dogs are mostly quiet and unobtrusive. And the way that dogs behave in the television shows were subtly yet profoundly different than the way real dogs behave in regular homes.